But now there really is no reason not to do it from like near day one. It's just so freaking easy to get data in a data warehouse and to push that data to some sort of activation, platform that you can get that value quite quickly. It doesn't have to be a complex implementation. Just start cutting in a couple segments and having customized journeys. And I think you'll find like value very, very, very quickly.
I'm thrilled today to have our guest, Scott Breitenother, on our podcast here today. Scott, thanks for joining us.
I was a little scared you were going to say, we usually have the best and brightest, but everyone was busy because of the holidays, so we've got Scott. So I'm glad that wasn't the landing. Yeah, it's good to be on. So I'm CEO and founder of Brooklyn Data. We're a data analytics consultancy that works with companies all shapes and sizes to help them with their data capabilities.
Yes, and Scott and I have known each other for quite some time. Back in the day, Scott ran data and analytics for a mattress company called Casper that some of you may have heard of. And he's since moved on to start his I want to call it a new gig, but it's been around for quite some time. It's actually incredibly established.
I have been at Brooklyn Data longer than I was at Casper.
And is Brooklyn Data bigger than? You guys bigger than 100 people now?
We're pretty much exactly 100 people.
Wow, that's
it's wild. I mean, we're 4 years and change old, and we're starting 2023 at 100 people. It's like wild. I can't even very cool, wild, but very wild.
That's great. Well, congrats to that, Scott. And for our listeners today, we have an incredibly exciting topic on the show. Our big question is all around our New Year's resolutions. And with the macro economy the way it is, many of us are looking at the same set of goals, or the same shape of goals, I should say, heading into now that we're fully into 2023. With 2022, we obviously saw a huge reset around macro expectations, around core efficiency goals, and these trends are only getting stronger, and the pressure is only increasing as we head into what doesn't seem to be like any better of an economy on January 2nd than it was on December 29th when we were all last in the office. Remember that day was. Really on today's show, we're going to talk about what this actually means. We're going to talk about customer lifetime value. We're going to talk about return on ad spend. We're going to talk about customer acquisition costs. We're going to run the gamut and really just going to go top down. We will explain what these things actually are, how to think about them, draw from Scott's experience at Casper, Scott's experience all across the hundreds and hundreds of customers that he's worked with at Brooklyn Data. And then we're going to get into how you measure it appropriately, how you optimize it, how you improve it, and really just go through the entire life cycle, focusing on some of the data foundations that Scott and Brooklyn Data Company have really become so adept at over the last 4+ years and 100 people. So with that, Scott, why don't we just roll into what some of these core metrics are, and some of the changes you saw, last year, whereas maybe in Q1 of 2022, people were talking about, optimizing top line growth. Now they're looking to really look at, what their customers are worth, and talk about that shift and what some of these new metrics are.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's almost like, I feel like the metrics haven't changed as much as people, I'd like to think, are starting to realize that averages lie. That, a blended LTV is not necessarily what you should be targeting. It should be targeting LTV for certain segments in your core segments. There are folks that, it's like whenever the economy or your business is struggling, you kind of make the decisions you should have been making all along, but didn't really have the pressure to make. And so it's like, do we want to target every single segment? Probably not. Do we want to target a blended LTV? Probably not. Are there 60% of your customers that are driving, or even less, or they're less than 50% of your customers that are driving 90% of your revenue? Probably. And so I think that's what people are starting to do, is they're starting to be thoughtful, starting to segment, starting to I guess when everything is up, you can just blast and or spray and pray. And I think people are starting to be a lot more thoughtful. Same metrics, but it's I guess focus and segmentation.
Yeah, so let's maybe break this down into an example. Maybe I'll sort of tee something off and you can run with it. If in the old world you said your customer was worth $12 and your lifetime value is $12, And from there, you set your ad budgets accordingly.
Yeah.
What you're saying here is that, look, not all customers are worth $12. Some might be worth 8 and others might be worth 15.
And some might be worth
so
1 or -1.
Yep. How do you unpack that? How do you pick that apart? How do you know, which customers are going to be worth which, and what does that look like?
I mean, it's a segmentation exercise, and I'm admittedly the data guy in the room, and so for me, the big driver is get all your data in one place. It's extremely difficult to impossible to do a segmentation exercise if you don't have this kind of concept of a 360 of your customers in a central location. And again, data guy in the room, so to be very transparent, and my suggestion is to get it into a data warehouse, is to get everything you know about a customer, whether it's sales, returns, visits to your website, customer support, get it all in one place and start to segment everything you know about the customers. And it is art and science. It is kind of talking to your customers. It's the hypotheses that your team has. It's your customer support team and your marketing team. They'll have hypotheses, and then work with your data team to really segment and identify who are those core segments. And then I think what you'll find is that is that when you look at those core segments, to your point, Jason, you have some segments that are extremely positive and some that are low to negative. And it's interesting. I mean, I'll give a kind of quick plug. I saw Neil Hoyne from Google do a talk a couple months ago at Marketing Analytics Data Science. He's got this great book called Converted, which just kind of really digs into this segmentation exercise. But it truly, once you look at the data, you'll find that not all customers are created equal, and you don't want to fight for every single customer because some of them will lose. And you didn't have to in the world where money was cheap and people were, just throwing money, everything was up to the right. But when that's not a given, you have to be a lot more thoughtful.
Yeah, 100%. And Scott, I don't know if you have any examples from customers you worked with where you put this customer 360 in place, with new segmentation abilities, and they sort of had an aha moment, in that, look, not every one of my customers is actually worth $12. There's a much sort of more nuanced way of looking at things.
I think the easiest example is, I think we've gotten so tempted. I think actually there's been a little bit of a pullback here, but over the last few years, just inundate customers with discount codes. At this point, everybody's trained to add something to cart, wait a day and get a code. And I think you might find that who's doing that, there's a subset of people that are doing that, of customers that are doing that and are only doing that. And then you might also find that your biggest and your most profitable customers don't care. And it's like little examples like that. I think that there's just a class of customers out there that are a group of customers that are just looking for deals and just less attached to the brand and more attached to discounts. But I think you also find that there's a subset in there that are probably attached to the brand that don't care about the discount. And if you didn't send the discount, they'd still convert.
100%. I know this time of year, many of our e-commerce customers are looking at exactly that data. So let's look at everyone who bought on deep discount over Black Friday. And let's look at everyone who didn't. And now let's look at the repeat purchase cohorts. Because the fact of the matter is, if you acquire someone through deep discount during Black Friday, you probably don't have much margin on that sale. If the goal of that sale is to get them to go and engage with the brand and buy again, then you need to be able to build these longer term segments outside of just, did they buy on Black Friday? Did they buy again in January, or maybe for Valentine's Day, or maybe for March or for April, and be able to track that over time, and having that data is critical.
But I would say it requires a lot of discipline, because the reason we all got into space is it's like an arms race of just throw another coupon. It's a really great way to just juice the numbers and get guaranteed kind of increase in sales. But it is kind of this drug that you get hooked on, and it's harder and harder to get out. And so it really takes discipline. And I was saying this earlier, but I mean, the more you can test it to give the company, give your organization confidence that this is the right move. Do a holdout test on some of your discounting strategies and see where it lands. Because sometimes you do need those discounts, but I would say if you're thoughtful, you test, you can be smart about it, and I think reset the playing field, because it's just not sustainable, the level of discounting that a lot of brands have been doing over the last couple of years.
Yeah, no, 100%. One thing we've also seen for some of our savvier customers is just, actually setting up what we call longitudinal holdouts. So let's look at, how you're training customers to look for coupons, and, not just asking, what's the effect of one sale on a customer, but let's ask what's the sale of you actually seeing emails every single, week for a brand that you used to pay full price. And now you see it's discounted 50 to 60% off, every other month. And with a longitudinal holdout, you can actually, you run those discounts, but only on a specific set of people. And then you can measure, what was the difference in value for those who received the more deeper discounts. Maybe they bought more dollars, dollar wise, but their profits were lower, as opposed to folks who, didn't see any of the discounts. Maybe bought a little bit less, but maintained those full, those full dollar purchases with much higher margins and better sustainability.
Yeah, and I think to that point, I think to the extent that it's possible to measure the success of your campaigns with gross profit instead of kind of sales or gross revenue.
And I think this is actually a great example as well to dive into. One of the big things that I've certainly been passionate about over the last several years, and I know Scott, you and I have a shared passion for this, is just thinking about representing customer data in its totality. One of the challenges with a lot of MarTech systems is they're overly reliant on the website pixel or website tags.
Yeah.
And if one of the things you're trying to optimize is for the margins of your products, well, there's no world in which you can collect that from tags, because even from a business IP perspective, you're not going to be putting your product margins on your website for your competitors to see. So this really just represents, especially in today's economy, a new way of thinking about your data. Because revenue is not sufficient. You really want to be asking, are you actually making profits on that revenue?
Yeah, I totally. I mean, 100%. It's kind of shocking when you realize that there's a subset of your customers that you lose money on, and you never recoup it. It's not like one of those things you lose on the first transaction. You lose on every transaction because they're trained and they look for discounts.
Yeah, 100%. And look, in old world, to your example around having moving from a segment of one to a much more nuanced segmentation perspective. If you sell $100 worth of product in the old world, well, if your overall margins were 80%, then or 20% rather, then that'd be $20 of profit. But in reality, a sale that's 40% off versus the sale that's full price, they're very, very different sales with very different margins.
Totally. And I think, on one order, it doesn't really matter. But, when you extrapolate that to your total, all the transactions you're doing in a week or a month, I mean, it is kind of shocking. The, single percentage point gains on your margins are huge. And I think, when you start to focus on that, but it requires the discipline to, I guess, look deeper into the funnel. The acquisition team's job is not just to land people on the website, it's to land qualified customers on the website that will pay full price, and to kind of monitor that all the way through the transaction, gross profit, and lifetime value, which is tough. But again, it starts by having all the data in one place. And like you said, it's the website visits, it's the transaction data, it's customer support. I used to feel like when I was in the Casper days, it was only a couple years in that we truly built a data warehouse and pushed that into our we use Simon data. But now there really is no reason not to do it from like near day one. It's just so freaking easy to get data in a data warehouse and to push that data to some sort of activation, platform, that you can get that value quite quickly. It doesn't have to be a complex implementation. Just start cutting in a couple segments and having customized journeys. And I think you'll find like value very, very, very quickly.
100%, Scott. And what would be your sort of advice for listeners who maybe will sort of start in two buckets? The first is for listeners on the marketing side, who realize they need a data warehouse, but they haven't been able to prioritize it. What would be your advice for those folks?
I would, be a little bit of a squeaky wheel, but a squeaky wheel with numbers. Run some run some back of the envelope math on some improvement opportunities you think are out there, or like back of the envelope analysis on lifetime value, and shows like, hey, I just did this with a little bit of effort. Give me a little bit of data team help, or bring in a consultancy like Brooklyn Data to get you up to that data warehouse. I would say like get started. In a month, you can have data in a data warehouse and push to your kind of activation channel like assignment data and running a campaign. You could probably even do it faster if you really focus. But it's just, I guess it's so easy to think, I guess, from a marketer that this is, challenging or it's hard. It is. Maybe it's doing myself a disservice. It's not as hard as it looks. It is not that hard to start from 0 to 1 and get the data in the data warehouse and start pushing customized and personalized marketing campaigns.
And we've talked so far a lot about some of the use cases around segmentation, around the technical capabilities, but maybe you can talk a bit about when you see teams really leverage their data properly across across their data teams, across into their marketing team. What does that look like for any folks on the marketing or the data side, for that matter, who are trying to figure out how to best design their organization, how to best collaborate across the aisle. When have you seen this work? And what are some what's some advice you'd give our listeners?
Yeah, I would say where I've seen it not work is where the marketers, they want to do something personalized. They have to put a ticket in. Maybe it'll be next sprint or the following sprint or a few sprints, and it just takes forever you can't. The speed of iteration and the number of iterations is just so slow. That's where it doesn't work out. When you're iterating in months or quarters. Where it does work out is through kind of teamwork and technology. You're able to experiment and spin up campaigns quite quickly. And I think how I've seen that take kind of manifest is that having dedicated data team resources, like dedicated to the marketing teams, and have that kind of swim lane that I'm not quite sure what the marketing team is going to ask for this week, but I'm going to collaborate with them and I'm going to iterate with them and I'm going to get the right data in there for them. And we're going to experiment. So it isn't just like put a ticket in and some random person will take it out of the stack. You should have dedicated bandwidth and people within the data organization that are focused on marketing. And it's really cool stuff because from a data perspective, it's like, where else can you see the power and the impact of what you do instantaneously turn into dollars than kind of working with marketing? The second is to make sure you've got a suite of tools that are really user friendly for the marketers. I mean, I think there is the iteration of quickly being able to get data into those tools, but also having a tool that a marketer feels really comfortable working in and creating segments. And there's always a category of work that requires a technical resource to get data in or do something changes. But there should also be a big category of kind of work that the marketers can self-serve. And so creating an environment, and that's tool selection, it's kind of data model underneath the tool that the data team is working on. But it's really is that like dedicated data resources for marketing, and then implementing a platform in such a way that the marketers are self-service to iterate themselves.
Yeah, no, I mean, this is exactly what we see as well, Scott. And I think one of the interesting points that I think is important to call out is the interplay between technology and people.
Yep.
When you don't have the right technology in place, then your teams might be collaborating every single day. But if your marketing team is trying to develop a new segment or get some basic insights around a new campaign, they should have the technology and the tools today to do that on their own. Where the two sides should come together is really aligning on data strategy, new data fields, what more needs to be collected, sort of more nuanced and advanced insights around what's exactly the reactions that consumers are having to various discounting strategies, the sort of second order and harder analytical problems. It's those sort of strategic decisions where the two sides should come together. But the daily operational business as usual type of stuff, you find your teams having to collaborate 10 points a day. Then it's great that they're collaborating well, but that's also what you should ask about your technology strategy.
I agree. I think too often it's like you kind of view your marketing stack and your data stack is completely separate. I kind of think of it as like the marketing stack is nothing more than like a BI tool. I mean, or I guess it should have that level of integration with the data stack. Like how I deliver values and value to my data stakeholders to make decisions using dashboards is part data modeling in the warehouse and part in the BI tool, and they work together. You can't do one without the other. You can't architect one and then we'll architect the other. You have to architect it end to end. And similarly speaking, you have to architect your marketing stack as end to end. It isn't a throw over the fence exercise. It's like, oh, here's our common, data model in the data warehouse. Plug into it, marketing team. It's like, okay, marketing team, I want to understand your requirements so that I can build a common data model that supports you and the rest of the business and empowers you to do what you do best without kind of having to jerry rig with like 5 joins and bringing all these different tables together. Like, you are a stakeholder and I need to design, my data model, my data stack with your needs in mind.
100%. And the key here, I think, is look, there's also a requirement to think about what some of the key use cases might be, then map them back to the data requirements that can make those use cases happen. And I think it's very interesting every year as sort of data technology improves. And that as some of these marketing use cases are a bit more well understood. Hopefully, this podcast here today will help some of our customers have help some of our listeners rather have a better understanding around LTV and ROAS. But as that matures, then the two sides are more easily are able to more easily collaborate.
100%. And I also think that the marketing stack is not only a destination, but it's a source too. I mean, like there's so much rich data that we should be pulling back from your marketing stack upstream into your warehouse to create a fuller picture of the customer and to do analysis, to surface insights in your BI tool that marketing insights and sales insights and CX insights all in one place. Even like, and then push it back out to your customer support channels. Like your CX team should be kind of getting smarter from the data that you're kind of from the marketing campaigns. Like everybody should be getting smarter in the organization from having a better picture of your customers.
Right. Look, and at the end of the day, anything is possible. When you think about what you're trying to do on the data side. Obviously, if you're trying to figure out what is your customer thinking when they unbox your product, that's going to be a little bit hard. But stepping outside the confines of the data you already have, asking what you could potentially measure, asking what incremental data you could support from a call center or anything else. These things are all possible today, and there's a tremendous amount of off-the-shelf infrastructure that can make it a lot easier than it was even 2 years ago.
Totally. And I feel like I kind of wish I could use the data stack and my knowledge and my experience today and go back in time and redo everything I did at Casper. Because I feel like 8 years ago, it felt like the Wild West in data and CDPs and MarTech. And everyone's kind of figuring out, I think now we've kind of landed on paradigms and we've landed on things that work. And so I think what we do at Brooklyn Data really well is to kind of understand what those paradigms are, get someone very quickly to a best-in-class data stack, and not have the data sitting on shelf somewhere, actually have that data, driving dashboards to drive decisions and driving campaigns to personalize, and doing that within, weeks, not months or years. And it can be done. I mean, it's people are doing it all over the world now. It's because that's what the smart companies are doing. They're being very sophisticated and they're having data not sit on a shelf and gather dust. They're having it drive value.
Scott, last section before we close out today. If you were to have this discussion again with anyone in the world, who would it be and why?
Yeah, that's a really great question. I think Brooklyn is interesting. We work with everything from digitally native brands, e-com brands, to large financial services, healthcare, and large publicly traded companies, and everywhere in between. And it's interesting because we feel like a lot of people, wherever you are in the spectrum, a lot of the companies are thinking the same problems. And I would say, like, I would love to have a chat with some of the kind of the, I guess, more historically slower moving industries, like banking, healthcare, and really understand how they're thinking about this kind of stuff. Because I think what we're definitely noticing across all of our clients, especially the customers that are in the heavily regulated space, that they are themselves starting to think more about personalization, lifecycle marketing. It's very interesting. I'd love to have if I can have a conversation with multiple people, with like a group of folks from kind of larger, more traditional brands, especially in the heavily regulated sectors, to really understand how they're thinking about this stuff. Because they're only a couple years behind the digitally native brands, but I sense that they are already starting to become quite savvy and thoughtful and realize that this is the future.
Yeah, no, 100%. Because historically, a lot of the issues around governance and controls have made personalization hard, just from a regulatory perspective. But with increased pressures around what we're talking about, this is obviously all changing. So that makes a ton of sense.
These issues don't just impact e-com, like the economy. Every single industry is having to get savvier and more thoughtful, and it's really cool to see these kind of, again, historically, more conservative industries really kind of build this muscle. It's very cool.
Great. Well, thanks for that, Scott. And thank you for coming on the podcast today and sharing your wisdom with us. Really, when I reflect on this conversation, it's about, resetting to, a new reality. I know, last year was, the start of this reset, but I think heading into this year, I know many of our customers and, many folks who are looking to, really optimize and rethink, some of their core, marketing goals have really just reset materially, and now it's time to double down on execution. Totally. So really appreciate the insight, Scott, around what you're seeing in the market, best practices, and all the changes you've seen over the last several years that have made optimizing some of these problems, all that much, all that much easier. So with this, Scott, maybe a quick plug for anyone listening who wants to learn more about you or Brooklyn Data Co.
Cool, thanks. Well, so check out brooklyndata.co. We're helping companies of all shapes and sizes really become data driven, and it does feel like in this world, no matter what industry you are, and especially with kind of where the economy is going, it's like being data driven is a differentiator. And so what we're really, really good at is coming in at companies at all shapes and sizes, helping them build that muscle, that best in class muscle, really quickly. And so I say, check out Brooklyn Data. We work in all industries. We're 100 folks at the moment. I'm always happy to chat data. Feel free to reach out. I'm Scott at brooklyndata.co.
Great. And thank you to everyone listening to this episode of the Data Unlocked podcast. If you'd like to learn more about Simon Data, please visit us on the web at simondata.com or email us at hello@simondata.
Cool.
Great.